Good. Thank you very much. Welcome to our fourth little discussion, debate, etc., on what's happening in the world of sport, and hopefully we want this to be again interactive discussion, debate, and sharing the good practice. We are recording it and we are sticking up on the website. You'll see from the link that Mark sent through that we're storing all four of them. It's interesting to look back at the first one and how things have moved on in the last 5 weeks or so. But two subject areas today really is how clubs and organisations are dealing with the current situation, and then are looking at the new, or if there is a new or different type of volunteer or workforce, paid or otherwise workforce, as we move out the other end, whenever the other end happens. So really, I think if I go back to the earlier debates, people were more bothered about locking down and mothballing or closing down clubs, or not closing down permanently, just shutting them down. And I think it would appear that has moved through. So we've got some information from Sport England about the emergency fund, and there's a number that have gone out. And I think we had Aaron last week from Archery say he's received some. We're certainly aware of some that received it. Sort of feedback is that predominantly from football, cricket, rugby, boxing, bowls, tennis as the predominant sports that are getting funding. Also, really clubs that are being very clear about their loss of income, but also clubs that have used some of their reserves, and they've been supported, I think, as well, when it's also seen that they're putting some of their money in, as well as looking for Sport England funding. So I think there will be some feedback on the unsuccessful ones, but I think there are thousands that have gone in, and Sport England did a really good job about turning them around as quickly as possible. So, I mean, are there any examples of people that have, of clubs, of organisations that have received support from the emergency fund, and any examples at all? Mick, I know you're on from football. I don't know if you've had any examples of the size of clubs, whether it's the larger ones, the smaller ones that have received it.
I haven't had any detailed breakdown, to be honest, Simon. I know there's been around 1,500 football clubs apply on average for £4,000.
Right.
They've actually passed the processing of applications now for football over to the Football Foundation.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm led to believe within that we are, as an organisation, looking at a sort of like a support package as well. Obviously working with the different partners, and now the situation is really moving out of crisis management to more of sort of like a stability. We're sort of like understanding what the landscape actually looks like, and what sort of like the partners can contribute, and what we can sort of like do. So we're currently working up a plan as well in relation to sort of like to support our football clubs. But I'd imagine, and we're doing quite a lot of work behind the scenes about which clubs are probably at the biggest at risk in terms of financial impact, but also in participation. And so we're doing a lot of data analysis to start with, in terms of those clubs at different national league system levels, at grassroots levels, the size of the clubs. Because obviously, you know, we want to look at supporting participation, as well as sort of like, you know, those that are there for sort of like the competitive end as well.
So
yeah. So we're doing a lot of analysis.
What's your feeling coming out of that? Is the, you know, because I do know of a county FA that's actually looking at, actually said on the quiet, well, actually, if some clubs do go, then it's the ones that are not good clubs anyway.
Well, I don't agree with that, because I think, you know, I think a lot of sport actually, and it's not just football, a lot of sports clubs live season to season.
Yeah,
and they do that because they want to reduce the cost for the participants. And, you know, there's actually, you know, a lot of clubs don't on purpose create lots of reserves unless they're going for a capital project or anything, really, because they're members clubs and they want to reduce the cost for their members.
Yeah.
So don't really go along with that. that sort of like that theory. I think there's going to be a reset, especially within National League system of the cost base of running teams at certain levels. But I think we're going to be doing we are doing lots of work in terms of, we want to still retain those big, large community clubs that provide opportunities for many, hundreds of teams that we've got now, within some clubs.
And what about the ones that are football and another sport? How are they being dealt with? Are they being dealt with in exactly the same way?
Yeah, we're just looking at it from sort of like the football. We don't have the data on the clubs, the other sports that they participate in. We only have the data on football.
Yeah.
But that's something, and it really is. We've done a lot of analysis, and ultimately it comes down to each individual club is different.
Yeah.
And some may have reserves and some may not. And that's the real challenge around this. And some of the bigger clubs can also maneuver and engage with their fan base. So Stafford Rangers that, I've been involved in, they've generated over £30,000 from their fan base. In
this short period of time?
Yeah. And there's a lot of clubs doing that.
Yeah. Well, how are they doing that then? Just by asking for donations?
Donations, but also selling shares as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Donations, shares, those kind of things.
Yeah. I mean, anybody else, any experiences as well from clubs that have applied or been successful, or are some clubs thinking, well, we're all right, we haven't got a great cost base? I know we've spoken to a few clubs who are solely their main cost is a facility hire, and because that stopped, they don't have any expenditures in effect. Any other examples of people that put in, or
Simon? I can offer some info if you want.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Steve Tabb. I work for England Hockey, so I can give people a view on hockey if you would like that. But also, I'm chairman of the hockey club at the Silhillians. So we're a multi-sport site. The site is owned by the Old Boys Association of the school. So we've had various conversations about who should apply, how we should apply, etc., etc. Essentially, where we've got to is that the site is applying via all the main government routes because they are an employer. They have salaried staff, so they have furloughed numbers of staff and that kind of stuff. So they will be applying via that route. And then the individual clubs are all applying separately for the emergency sport funding. We, as a club, have a financial requirement to pay to the Silhillians every year, which is a rent, which is for the use of the site. So essentially, bar, clubhouse, changing rooms, etc. That money goes towards paying for the full-time groundsman, general maintenance costs, etc. So that is a cost that we have to bear whether we're playing sport or not. That is the amount that we contacted Sport England about in terms of requesting that they cover our quarter's rent for the March to June period. We would normally cover some of those costs through playing hockey over the summer and doing pay-as-you-play stuff and casual stuff over the summer. The money we get for that helps to cover pitch hire and to cover some of the money towards the rent. Obviously, we don't have the pitch hire, so the money we would normally bring in about £4,000 over the summer, and our quarterly rent as a hockey club is about £2,700. Right. So obviously, there's a split there between pitch hire and rent. So we applied for the rent part and were successful in being offered the full amount.
Super. I mean, I think that we've come across a number of multi-sports clubs who are just juggling between, what do they put in for and who puts in for it. Does the main club put in for it, or the parent club, for want of a better phrase, put in?
Yeah, I think because of our organisational structure, it's been quite easy for us. One is very clearly a business, and so they're going down the business route, and then the sports clubs are just tenants of the site. So it's quite easy to separate that out for us as to what we should apply for. From a hockey perspective, we're aware that 12 clubs. We have an infrastructure of 870 clubs, and 12 that we know of have applied for funding. We don't know which ones are successful because Sport England won't tell us that. So we have to rely upon the club to tell us. We know that Beeston were successful. They applied for the full amount, 10 grand, and they were successful.
That doesn't surprise me with Beeston,
Well, no, I mean they're a very commercially sound business. So we've had of the 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clubs applied for the full 10k. A couple of them only applied for about £1,000 each, and then there's bits and pieces in between there.
There will be another hockey club that's applying, which I think
maybe Sutton Coldfield. I'm thinking
possibly.
Perhaps.
For exactly the same reason that you've described, actually, Steve, the fact that we've got a parent facility that we pay rent to every quarter, and I think hockey sort of closed down. A couple of games left, I think, but the season in effect had ended, and it hasn't got all the trials and tribulations of professional football. But it is that period, that where we would be running summer activity that covers it. And I think that's the bit that Sport England is. Are you building up reserves, or are you actually covering, looking at the running of the club at the same time? And I think that. Yeah, and
I think as long as your justification is sound enough, there don't appear to be any problems. To me, my application was very logical, made total sense, wasn't asking for too much, and it got processed without any questions. So. Yeah.
Are there any sports that are non-asset owning that are, albeit that in Steve's case, they are hiring off an organisation that's effective? I'm thinking more local authority or school-based clubs that are hiring, any of those that have applied at all. I think as Steve just described, I think it's been very clearly split down into the furloughing and claiming of money through self-employed status on the governmental side, or alone in terms of a business, and then looking at the member-based clubs that are looking at using the Sport England funding. Any examples at all? I see triathlon, anything on Peter? Anything there at all?
We've had clubs apply, but we don't actually have any feedback from those clubs to what they've done, or any feedback from Sport England. We're sort of regional managers are out there talking to the clubs and basically seeing what they're coming back with. But to be honest, our clubs are in a lot different situation to a lot of clubs. Obviously, they don't have venues that they own. They pretty much hire everything they do, and some of our clubs, as I was on a committee call the other night, some of our clubs have actually just locked down and gone, we'll see you after the lockdown. And no response from them. So then again, we've started up a Facebook group for the membership hub, and there's lots of clubs out there doing lots of good virtual stuff. So it's a real mix from those that have just shut down to those that are getting on with it. But then there's the others that are struggling a little bit and putting in for cash, especially for those that run events, and those events are now folded. So we'll see what comes back from that.
I mean, I think there's a lot in that. Talk to a gymnastics club as well. That it's very easy to mothball that because
on a national one about grassroots football.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Okay. I think the other question to people are there any clubs that are actually looking at restructuring or changing, or looking at having this opportunity of this period of time of looking at the recruitment of new people into their main committees or boards, or any examples of where they're fundamentally looking at the club as a whole and using this downtime to just step back and reflect a little bit? Or are they just planning for the new launch, etc.?
Can I? Hello, can you hear
Yes.
me? My name's Leslie Thomas.
Hello, Leslie.
Hi, I'm involved with netball, grassroots netball,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm on this call representing Netball South West, which is a regional board.
Hi.
Hi. I think we're generally speaking, grassroots netball, as like a lot of you have mentioned, is just hires the facilities as and when they need it. They would hire facilities for the season.
Yeah.
Our season is more or less finished.
Mm.
I think counties have they have summer leagues, but that's on an as and when basis. So if they're not hiring, they've got no cost.
Yes.
And obviously got no income. I think the main concern for netball when it starts again, it's generally a September start.
Yeah.
Is the knock-on effect of people not being in employment, not being able to afford membership of England Netball, and not being able to afford their payment to their clubs, their local clubs.
Yeah, I think the other thing we were talking to Netball Development Officer actually, who was thinking about Summer League and actually thinking about Summer League in a different way. The Summer League usually is sort of May, June, early July, but actually I think it's unlikely that people are going to go on holiday this year, certainly not to Spain and Italy and France. So actually the summer period isn't necessarily like to be a closed down period. There actually could be a more opportunity as and when Uncle Boris says we can start running around again. There might well be an opportunity for summer leagues in that August, late July, August period, which has just been a completely dead time.
You're right. Yes, I think you're right. That's an opportunity. The rate determining bit though is a lot of them are school facilities, college facilities. Definitely. Whether they will be open, they might be open for teaching, but they might not be open for their sports facilities.
Yeah.
That's the sort of the thing that's sort of holding us back. We're not able to book anything at the moment because all the staff are on furlough. You can't really get through to the right person. I'm sounding very pessimistic here, but no,
it's
looking forward to it all starting again.
I think it's pragmatic rather than pessimistic, but I think it's that thinking about a different sort of season. But again, if the facilities are not available, and we're finding that through our company work about, we're looking to try and plan in booking courses, etc. For our coach education program, and we can't get hold of anybody to book the courses into. So it's fine using this time for planning, but if you can't get hold of the people, it's a little bit difficult. But I think we're aware of sort of medium-sized governing body that is it's not netball, that are a winter-based sport that actually have 4 start points for their league, for the national league, and also 4 starting points for starting back up again. Depends on when and if it starts back up again, and I think that's the difficulty is that scenario planning, and is it worth doing that scenario planning for starting competition again? I'm just wondering if anybody's actually thinking about, because the guidance hasn't been released yet. I think it will be released in the next few weeks, about the 55 million Sport England relaunch money. I don't know if anybody's starting to think about that at all, about how maybe that can be used to activate more participation, because at the moment we get physical activity gets an advert every 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they say everybody should exercise for half an hour. So it's a great advert, and also there's 750,000 volunteers into the NHS that maybe could be volunteering into sport. If we had 10% of that would be great. So I don't know if anybody's starting to think about that, planning around the 55 million yet, about what does relaunch look like. Has anybody got to that point yet? No.
Simon, I think that's a $64,000 question, isn't it?
It's a $55 million question.
Well, yeah. We've talked about it, but at the moment, I think as a sport, from a triathlon's perspective, we're looking at the worst case scenario, that there be no triathlon this year, no participation, that clubs will become active again, and I guess it's us supporting the clubs in building up an activity program again. But until the government gives us some further sort of guidance, it's very difficult. We're looking into a crystal ball, really.
Is a view about what that will, in terms of age group participation? Is there thought about that, or is that still just wait for a bit of government guidance?
Well, yeah, I'll have to say the ETU and the ITU haven't covered themselves in glory, because there's been a number of races that have been very late, and they've been very late in cancelling either ETU champs or world champs stuff going on, and refunds of those sorts those events and stuff has been very, very slow, sporadic, and not helpful. So we've been campaigning to make sure our age groupers get their money back.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're doing more of the pushing with those governing bodies, European and world, than they're sort of doing. We're sort of canvassing quite hard that they do the right thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm aware within the swimming fraternity there is a looking at insurance and looking at trying to whether the insurance could start to cover cancelled events in these situations, and I think it at the moment it doesn't. So I think there's going to be a whole review of insurance as well around this, because the insurance companies, I don't think, are throwing out the money at the moment, which is not surprising. Anything more around planning for the future, or are clubs of sports just waiting for some indication of how that open up might happen?
I think we're just waiting. We're waiting to see how the reactivation starts, and what gets rolled out first. Yeah.
And I bet the M5 is quite nice to drive up and down at the moment, but that's another matter altogether.
Yes, it's lovely.
Yeah. Don't keep these people out. Yeah. Okay. I think I want to move it on to the workforce, and I think, and I expressed this last time and time before, my worry around, and if I look at swimming as a there's going to be a lot of slightly porky swimmers coming out, and young people really keen and agile coaches. The coaches generally are aged around about 30 through to 40, but the officials, the people on the pool side who run the events, are in excess of 60 at best. And I think the concern is that we'll be able to run events as and when things get released, because older people might still be isolated, or might be in fear of coming out of isolation. Had anybody given any thought to actually looking at or encouraging clubs to look at their volunteer workforce and looking at their different workforce in a particular way?
Simon, I know from a football perspective, we're looking at, obviously, a lot of our administrators are in the high risk groups. So we're looking, obviously, at potentially new people doing functions that traditionally they have done.
Yeah.
So we're creating a toolkit for what we need in order to get back into football, be it through an administrative point of view, be it club affiliation, player registration, all those things, and actually creating, and we have quite a bit of this, but a lot more of a focused resource on video, VTs, snippets, how to do things, because we recognise there may be a lot of new people doing operations that traditionally the older workforce have been doing, and they may need additional guidance to actually support them through that.
I know, Steve, you've got what I quote quite regularly, one of the best volunteer recruitment people in your club, who's, I think he's a car salesman, I think, from memory. Were you thinking about anything around, whether broadly in hockey or within Old Sills, around recruiting new volunteers?
Well, certainly reflecting on what just been said about football, we're very aware that our umpiring population is generally of the older ilk, and so so we are conscious that might have an impact on us, and we've started doing some online training both as England Hockey and as Old Highlands Hockey Club. So coaching is still coaching has been continuing online pretty much as soon as we had to start doing it. Umpiring, we haven't moved all our content online yet, but we've had online content on our online platform for 5 or 6 years anyway. And so there's content, and we're essentially just encouraging all the clubs to get as many people to complete that stuff as possible. In terms of what's happening with the club, I am liaising a bit more with some of our younger members and getting them to do some of the England Hockey provided online training, and then also doing some stuff myself, just with stuff like Teams chats. And then also there's bits and pieces going on within the hockey umpiring world, where they're doing sort of watch parties of games. And so the FIH, so the International Hockey Federation's released all of its international matches for the last 2 years.
Right.
And you can view those on YouTube and on various online platforms. So there's various watch parties going on with different expert umpires sitting and answering questions as people watch those games. So yes, nothing massively structured at the moment. It's all quite informal, but definitely a recognition that it's our officials that are our most at-risk area, and so that's where the focus is going into. Coaching is less of a concern right now, but but umpiring is there.
If you've got a link, if you have got a link to hand, if you want to pop it in the chat box, and same with Mick, if that toolkit's up and running, I think that'd be useful just to stick it in the chat box and people have a look, because I think that appears to be the concern, is that actually the workforce, the mature workforce, are more likely to be locked down, and particularly within club administration, the sort of dry side of the committee side of clubs, but also that officiating stuff. I think that's the concern. But is that a real opportunity to look at generating some new workforce and younger people into volunteering, and how do we tag them in that sense? And
I have to admit, within hockey, we're quite almost quite pleased about this forcing people's hands. We were wanting to move people onto online training anyway, and we're getting pushback from the community saying, "Oh, people won't want to do that. They won't want to do online stuff. They want to do the practical. It needs to be face to face. They need to do this, etc., etc." Now we're having to do it, and people are going, "Oh, this is better than I thought it would be." So it's moving us towards where we want to be, which is it's kind of sped that process up for us. So that's been good.
I can assure you, from a Club Matters point of view, the open workshops that we've put out are just sold out within a couple of days, and we also, as a company, run the UK coaching safeguarding workshops online, and we've got one on Sunday morning, and that filled up over bank holiday weekend. So there is a demand for it, whether it is the environment at the moment, but I think actually people will get comfortable and used to it, and actually it will become part of the norm as we come out the other end. And I think that training and stuff online, people become so comfortable with it, it'll just become second nature. I think that there are a couple of governing bodies we're in conversations with, similar to what you've just described there, around watching, in fact, particularly around officials doing rules tests, doing what happens next type scenarios with you are the ref type things. I think those are some things that are really looking at actually the workforce. I think there is that concern that the workforce isn't going to be big enough or robust enough to actually respond to the participation as and when it comes back. Any other examples around developing the workforce at all, and whether it's at a club base or on a national governing body basis? Any concerns or actions that are being taken? Okay, I think there's some good practice I'm seeing in a couple of sports where actually they're looking at action planning with their clubs. So they're looking at some key aspects, i.e. their constitution, welfare, their committee structure, their finance, and then their workforce, and actually action planning over the summer period for those sort of 5 areas. And I think there is a debate, as we mentioned before, about cash reserve and legal structure. I don't know whether any clubs are starting to think about looking at their legal structure, whether they move from a members only to a company limited without guarantee or charity, and or whether they're thinking about their cash reserve, whether actually they should have had a little bit more or they've got it about right. I mean, Mick was mentioning earlier about, they're there for the members and therefore, not there to build up a load of money in the bank. They're there for about providing a member service. I don't know whether anybody has explored that with clubs, or whether clubs are starting to reflect on maybe their legal status and or their level of cash reserve on things.
Yeah, Simon again is me. We've run a really successful sort of like webinars, running a series of webinars for our clubs now. We ran one last week for business continuity planning, and created a business continuity model for them to utilise. And I think we had over 160 odd volunteers on it.
Right.
And so we normally would get 50-60 people on our monthly webinars, support webinars. But they're just going, sort of like the attendance now. We've got one next week for about our leagues and administering our leagues, and we've got over 800 people on it.
Right.
So there's there is a lot, and we've created a what we've called a digital gym, so we can signpost our volunteers to, and how to run online AGMs and all those kind of things, which have been really well received.
Yeah, we've put some stuff on the Club Matters webpage on running an online meeting, running an online AGM. I've got an AGM on. I'm running an AGM on Saturday actually, which should be quite interesting, I think. And trying to put video content in there as well as having discussions, etc., and breakout rooms and all that sort of thing, and trying to make it a little bit more different. I mean, if you've got links to those, Mick, I think it'd be useful if you have got them to hand. If you I know it's football specific, but I think it'd be worthwhile people having a look at. If you whack the link in the chat box, that'd be.
If I can get it now, I can certainly find. I haven't got it to hand now, but I haven't done them personally. Members of the team have done.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure people can trawl around fa.com because it's such a small, concise website, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
No,
we've got a dedicated page now for support, which we're actually building up. So I'll get the link now and put it in.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Any other examples across sports of where because I think we're moving from that, as I said earlier, that crisis. Let's deal with the crisis. Let's deal with the problems and the challenges straight away, to now looking at future development and looking at making the clubs better, making the organisations better. Any other examples where people have started to look at that? I know there is a lot of concentration on what this participation look like when it comes back. Are any other examples where people are looking at building a stronger future in that sense?
Again, Simon, from a hockey perspective, that's one of our key projects at the moment. That's what we're doing as a governing body. We've got 3 or 4 key projects, and one of them is this club support model, and includes stuff like, how do you hold, can you as a club hold an online AGM? And if so, how do you go about it, what to consider, all that kind of stuff. So again, sort of in line with what football have done, we're looking at all of those key things around how do you use this time to get your safeguarding up to date, all the stuff that probably should be done all the time but never gets as much focus as it should do. We're kind of we're pulling all the content of that together and should be released to our clubs within the next 3 or 4 weeks, I think.
I'll quality control that, Steve.
Good.
from a hockey club point of view, but yeah, I think there is governing bodies are pushing out a lot of stuff. I sense that what clubs have swapped a little bit, and actually they need that contact from the governing body maybe on a one-to-one basis. I think don't know whether people are picking that up, that actually those clubs that are looking at future planning would welcome a conversation with development staff. I don't know whether people are picking that up as well. Okay, yeah, certainly from a regional swimming point of view, we're more worried about the sort of smaller clubs that have just disappeared. They might just have closed down and quite be happy with that and ready to get going again. But I think there is a concern about those that are a little bit more fragile, whether they'll come back again. I don't know whether there's a view about that in terms of what clubs will come back, whether there is a group of clubs that are less likely to come back or more likely to come back. Is there a concern about membership as well as volunteers? I mean, what are the, are there any key issues that are coming out from clubs? Okay, really, I mean, we've got quite a few people on the call. Are there any other examples of good practice or great practice or different practice that anybody would like to highlight that could be shared across different sports and different communities at all? No. Any other issues that anybody would like to raise that they'd like to maybe throw around about how people have looked to solve problems at all? Are there any other issues that anybody would like to raise and just ask? There's no silly questions here because we've not been in a pandemic for about 100 years or so. So it's and I'm not so sure the webinar back then was that good. So are there any other issues or questions anybody would like to raise or thought would be a nice burning question for today? Anybody? Okay. Well, I think we'll sort of brought it to a close naturally. Thanks very much for coming on. Thanks for the contribution. We're sensing that actually now these debates are not as valuable as they were sort of 3 or 4 weeks ago. And what we're doing as an organisation, I'm speaking to various chief execs and directors of sport and things like that about how they're dealing with things in short sort of podcasts. So we'll be putting those up on our little COVID-19 website, and we'll circulate those around, and they'll generally be in short YouTubes or podcasts, etc. The other thing that we've been doing is supporting 2, possibly 3 at the moment, 2 active partnerships in terms of direct support. And we'll put some links on there to the resources that we've produced, which might be just duplicating what people are doing already, but it might be worth referencing it. Now comes the end of debate adverts. So as mentioned before, Club Matters websites are all virtual now. So we'd love conversations with, and we are having conversations with governing bodies, but love conversations with governing bodies around how to make those sport specific and or geographic specific. So we'd welcome that, and they're all available on virtual classrooms as well as face-to-face, although face-to-face will be a long time coming. And from a company point of view, we will be having sort of generic coaching modules coming online that people can do interactively and on their own at 3 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So those are coming on. But any other information or anything like that people like to share, please don't hesitate to do so. Does anybody else want to just pitch in anything or add anything to today's debate at all? Good. Well, lovely.